Hello, Type 1 Tribe. Happy Friday. Welcome to another, what do we call this? Community Q&A, that's right. We do these every Friday at 12:30 p.m. WA time. If you're joining us from outside WA, welcome. This time of year, I think, oh, it's April. I don't know. You might be 3 hours in front still, or just two. I've lost track. GMT +8, 12:30 p.m. You can figure it out from there, though. Joining me is Mr. Benjamin Jardine. How you doing, Benjamin?
I'm doing very well. Can you tell that we do these every week when we can't remember the name?
Complete mental blank. Every week, every Friday, 12:30 p.m. We are, if you would like to ask a question in today's Q&A, you can do so from within one of our Facebook groups, either our adults community or our parents community. Bree will pop the links to those in the comment thread of the streams, if you're not already watching from one of our groups. All right, no Carly today, I have to say. As much as I do love, a good fisticuffs with Carly. It's a little bit sad that she's not with us, but she is down south on a holiday. Good for her. So yes, we will see her back here next week. Just want to let you know some of the things coming up at the Family Centre this week. So we have Parents Coffee Catch Up. So this is parents of Type 1 kids. Friday, 26th of April at 9:30 here at the Family Centre. School holiday events as well. So we're coming in, next week is week 2 of school holidays. We have Kids in the Kitchen happening, Italian favourites. That is definitely going to get the juices flowing. Some yum stuff there. Still a couple of spots left at that one if you're looking for ways to entertain the kids during the holidays. Pilates classes are happening here 9:30 on Thursday mornings. They're just $20 a session, or you can book in, I think, for 5 of them for 100. Yeah, you can sign up online. And T1 Boot Camp, the next dates are the 4th and 11th of May. I promise you there's no running or exercise involved in that whatsoever. Just a lot of good Type 1 information with a lot of other people who also have Type 1, putting good information into practical action. Whether you're on MDI or insulin pump, bootcamp, great way to upskill if you're newly diagnosed, or just get a refresher if you're a Type 1 veteran like me. All right. Shall we go to first question, Benjamin? What are we talking about? Oh, this is really good. This was a comment that came, I posted this into our adult community. I just wanted to kind of pick up on the conversation because it's such a good topic, shall we say, for various reasons. So this is from the author of the book Sugar Surfing, which some of you may be familiar with. He's an endocrinologist, he has Type 1 himself, and he put up a Facebook post a few weeks ago now, quote, "Insulin pumps might be getting smarter, but some patients are compensating for that."
Yikes.
Interesting. I know Benjamin had some pretty strong thoughts about that when it was put up. You want to give us your initial gut reaction, Benjamin?
Oh my goodness. Where do we start with this one? I don't get angry as much anymore because I'm used to comments like this, but this one just really ground my gears. I had to go and take a moment once I read this one, and disappointing because it came from a person living with Type 1. I think one of the things that we all know is that language matters, and just how so much of the messaging out there is that you're not doing good enough. And then this message comes out and basically says, hey, insulin pumps are getting better and patients are getting worse. And what does that do to people? I mean, for goodness sakes, diabetes, no one asks for it. It's, we all talk about the extra full-time job that we didn't ask for. And then there's this implicit assumption in this that, oh, someone dared to pay a little bit less attention because their pump was handling a little bit more. And so then people walk away thinking, oh, no, I'm not doing good enough anymore. I mean, he took time to post this. We were just talking about this before the stream. This is not just an off the cuff comment that, had a bit of clumsy language in it. This is a post publicly saying pumps are getting better, patients are compensating for the fact that they're getting better. In what universe does judgment have place here? And the fact is, whether he intended it or not, the impact is real. And you can see it just in the conversation that's happened in the community since he posted it, Adam. Suzanne posted a beautiful comment saying, look, my headspace was not where I wanted it to be. And this was a really triggering comment because it just brings back all of that. Oh, I'm never good enough. Nothing I do is good enough. I'm not keeping on top of my blood glucose as well as I need to. It's just, honestly, for health professionals, there has to be that little trigger in your head that says, just take a minute. Is the language I'm using reinforcing the fear stick? Is it reinforcing the judgment? Is it making people feel better or worse? I can't imagine a scenario where someone reads that, health professional or person with type 1, and goes, yep, nailed it.
Ship it, yeah.
Oh.
I mean, I 100% agree with you around kind of health professionals of all people working in this space and living with type 1, should be able to pass these kinds of phrases better. Is there some value, though, in putting something out there that's a little bit, what's the word? Provocative to
You used
start a
provocative and I
conversation?
used something much less friendly.
But in order to start a conversation, like to say, okay, what do we mean by this? Let's talk about how diabetes technology is evolving and how it's being used.
Sure, but how difficult is it to say, hey, I'm seeing something really interesting and exciting, which is that as pumps get smarter, people get to take a little bit of a breath and maybe not think quite as much about type 1. What do we reckon? Would have been an awesome conversation. How about an implied people are getting stupider as pumps getting smarter is not the way to kick that conversation off. And, what conversation are we trying to prompt here? There is nothing wrong, and in fact, everything right in thinking about how do I make this full-time job slightly less demanding? How do I reduce the input a little bit? And seeing the community's interaction on this was a really good reinforcement of it because everyone was popping up their own strategies and saying, there is no one way to manage this. It's not like we're all sitting here going, well, the algorithms can just get smarter so we all get stupider. We're all saying there's a whole bunch of different tools that you can use. And some people go heavy and hard. And actually, I think he missed a complete group of people with hybrid closed loops because there's a whole bunch of people who get super excited by the fact that they can see more about what's going on and they have more control and they nerd out even more in order to get the control where they want them to be. Other people go, thank goodness there's a safety net. There's something I don't have to think about, and they relax a little bit. And that's awesome. It's the exact same reason that I go a bit lower carb. It's actually just genuine, pure laziness because I know the lower the carb I go, the less variation I get in my blood glucose. It's an awesome trade-off for me. It's not that I then go and tell everyone else, stop eating all carbs and give yourself as little insulin as possible. All of these things are just different ways to go, this thing has to come with me for the rest of my life. I don't want it to. So how do I make it small without it kicking my butt? And instead,
I'd love to see
this message comes out and says, don't do it. What's wrong with you, you lazy bugger? Not good enough.
Phrasing not on point. I'd love to see some of the data this was based on because what was underneath the hood when I listened to an interview about this comment. And he kind of explained it a bit more in detail. So I'd love to see the data this was based on because what he was essentially saying was for people who are not spending as much time, always looking at blood sugar levels and trying to continuously keep themselves in range, hybrid closed loop systems seem to be working well for them in that we're seeing increased amounts of time in range for them. And then you've got the people who have higher, was basically all he said, time in range. And so then you get on a hybrid closed loop system and people go, okay, cool, something to do some of the work for me, I won't pay as much attention to it, and so we're not seeing the same benefits. But I have no idea what the numbers in those studies are. So are we seeing stuff where someone is, they're doing great at, say 70% time in range, and then they get on a hybrid closed loop and it drops to, I don't know, 50 or 40 or something? Or is it just that it's not having the same 20 to 30% increase that it is for everybody else? Like I'd love to see the detail and what's going on in there, because we've got to find that balance.
Just to challenge you a little bit on this one, Adam, I think the language running in the healthcare professionals' head when they post something like this is, we aren't seeing the benefits because we're not seeing the return in time in range. But what you said was, people have to think about it less. They are seeing the benefits.
That is a benefit.
That is what they want. Now, we can get into the nuances of what's a good time in range, what's going to set you up best for your long-term healthcare, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But that's for each person to decide. And if you're a healthcare professional sitting there saying, the only thing I care about is time in range, you're just reinforcing that you're not doing good enough, your number's not good enough. If you dare relax for a second, how dare you? And then we're going to set a whole bunch of people up for burnout, disappointment, fear. It'll mean less people will go and even talk to their healthcare professional because they're going to be told you're being lazy because you're going on an insulin pump. And I've heard things like that before. I've heard healthcare professionals say, you can't have an insulin pump because it's going to make you pay less attention to diabetes. How dare you? So yes, I know I'm on my giant soapbox here, but for goodness sake, can we get the message out there that people with type 1 each have their own prescription for how they're going to manage it, that they have to decide for themselves, that reducing the input required is an amazing thing. And can we just give people all the tools and knowledge to decide what they want to do and how to make diabetes, a passenger instead of being a slave to it and thinking you've got to pay attention to it all the time. You can't ignore it. Don't let it hold you back. Don't listen to this post. I'm sorry, I'm on my super high horse here. I think it's more than language. I think it speaks to some of the challenges we have with the way healthcare professionals treat something, because they see diabetes as a number. We know what it's actually like to live with it, which is a bloomin' complex thing in amidst a bloomin' complex life.
I'd love to see more health professionals including in the conversation, not just the time in range piece or the A1C or whatever it is, but really talking about that concept of physical health versus mental health, or physical health alongside mental health, and like, how do we quote unquote measure, quantify these two things so that we can see what kind of net benefit is overall? Because if you're killing yourself mentally to maintain whatever your target, whatever you want for time in range or whatever, not really a great quality of life. So yeah, if we could talk about the combination of those things more with health professionals, I think that would be a massive game change.
Totally. I just saw a comment from Adele in our adults community, kind of reinforcing that there is actually a conversation to have here, that maybe some people are actually letting go too much when they get the new technology, or they're not understanding what the pump can do and can't do. But you're not going to open this conversation up with a judgmental comment like that, for goodness sake.
Yeah. Interesting conversation.
Breathe. Okay, let's go to a quicker and easier question from the community, shall we?
All right.
So we've had a couple of questions pop up in the community recently about Omnipod, and I guess more broadly about insulin pump control with phones. And I think everyone wants to get to the point where, given we already live our life off a phone, why can't we just do all of our control and everything for the pump off the phone? There are apps for most insulin pumps now, but we're not quite at the point, at least with Omnipod, where you can control it all from your iPhone today. It will have your blood glucose. We're all familiar with CGMs feeding into phones, but right now, no bolusing from phone, no control from the phone. I will say, as a community member and not a healthcare professional, there are people who are working out how to do this, and this is where we get the DIY looping thing. That's because of this frustration. But believe me, having spoken to all of the insulin pump companies, they get this and they're all working on it one way or another to get to the point where we can get bolus from phone, we can get control from the phone. So look, it's happening, but right now, no, if you download your Omnipod apps to your phone, you're not going to be able to drive the pod from the phone. You're still going to have to carry the PDM. Yes, it's like carrying another phone. We're almost there. We're breaking through.
Yeah, I will. If you're really wanting that kind of control, have a look at some of the looping stuff. Again, not a healthcare professional, but I looped for a while with Omnipod, and it was pretty amazing what that could do. You've really got to go in with your eyes wide open and be ready to absorb a lot of information to make all of that go. But being able to, I was bolusing from my Apple Watch, like that was just a game changer. It was sad to let that go when I switched pumps, but yeah, no, some really cool stuff out there. So it is possible if you really want to dive in hardcore.
I will totally admit that I lasted with the Omnipod for about a week before I went into the DIY loop because I couldn't stand carrying the two things. But back to our previous conversation, if what you're looking for is to make diabetes smaller in the short term, building a DIY loop is not going to be the thing that makes your life any less absorbed by diabetes. I thought I understood it, and that thing blew my mind. And obviously, these things are not supported by the companies. You're relying on a community that's really pushing well ahead of where the establishment is. So yes, it can be done, but we would send the message to everyone that the pump companies are all working on this. We're not far away from that point where bolus from phone will be quite a common option for people who are using insulin pump technology. All right, let's pivot slightly to, oh, Adam wants to interrupt me. Go for it.
All I wanted to say was if you'd like to ask a question, you can do so from within one of our groups, either our adults community or our parents community. Bree will be keeping an eye on, if you're not already a member, Bree will be keeping an eye on anybody that would like to join. You can go in there, fill in the form, and we will let you in so you can ask a question. All right,
Absolutely.
Benjamin, unexplained highs, talk to me.
Just while I'm on that, Adam, just as Adele did in our adults community, even if you haven't got a question, if you've got some experience to add to the conversation, please do. Yes, between Adam and I, we've got 40 years of type 1 experience. In the community, we've got a couple of thousand years worth of experience of type 1. So please throw your ideas
according to my calculations, 10,000
Crikey.
years of lived experience in our adults community alone, actually.
All right. Well, if we can't solve something between 10,000 years of experience, then there's no hope for any of us. All right. Let's talk about something that comes up in the community all the time, which is what happens? Why am I getting an unexplained high? Why is my blood glucose sitting up stubbornly? I haven't done anything different. I can't point to a reason why it's up there. And every one of these Q&As, we like to throw a little bit of a checklist in for a different thing. So let's talk about unexplained highs today. And actually, just before I go into unexplained highs, let me give you my number one piece of advice for unexplained highs. We've spoken before about the fact that there's 42 different known factors that influence blood glucose. Lots of those can't be seen and they can't be controlled. So the first thing to do is to give yourself a bit of grace. Don't beat yourself up because your blood glucose is up and you can't work out why. Please don't go to language like, I'm brittle, I'm not in control, I'm failing my diabetes. This is what type 1 does. And I guarantee you, every person living with type 1 has unexplained highs. It doesn't matter how good your control is. It doesn't matter what technology you're using. It doesn't matter. Everyone. I had an unexplained high last night and I still have the same reaction 21 years afterwards, which is to look at it and just want to scream at it and then avoid a rage bolus. But all right, let's go to what are some things to think through. So we'll start with the easy ones. Maybe your insulin's not working properly. Is it off? So has it been out of the fridge for too long? Have you been exposing it to a whole bunch of heat? Did you stick it in the cabin of a plane, which is a whole separate conversation? There are lots of different ways that it can start to be less effective. And typically what we see with insulin, at least in lived experience, is it just gets a little less effective. It's not like it doesn't work anymore. It just doesn't have the impact that you think. So make sure your insulin's working, switch it if you need to, see if that makes a difference. The classic one for an unexplained high is the superpower that we never asked for, which is your ability to detect when you're sick before you get sick. So your body is sick before you know it. It's responding to it. It is becoming insulin resistant before you actually start to show symptoms. So quite commonly we find maybe 24 hours before you start showing symptoms, your blood glucose is going to start being annoying. And that is something that is worth looking at. But again, it's one of those factors you can't control. You can't stop being sick. You can't stop the insulin resistance for it. It links into hormones can really drive increases in blood glucose. So some people, it's every time of the month, it changes in a predictable pattern. For other people, it's not predictable. For some people, it's the stress hormones, things like cortisol that really kick them. And what I'd really suggest is thinking about, is there a consistent pattern here? What we sometimes find is that, for example, people have more stress when they're working. And some people actually get to the point where they have to change their diabetes management a little bit when they're working versus when they're at home. So I've met people, for example, who have two different profiles if they're using an insulin pump, one for the weekends and one for work. If someone's on MDI, they might find they have to give themselves a little bit more insulin when stress hormones are high. It's something that requires a bit of experimentation, and I would very much recommend having your diabetes educator with you to work those out, because they are ninjas at finding those patterns. My classic one was public speaking. Eventually I got over it, but every time I was about to do and it was literally the minutes before stepping on stage, my blood glucose would jump to 15, 16, 17 out of nowhere as the body's adrenaline and cortisol just went bang, there you go. Again, you can't control it. It's something to be aware of, and be careful of a rebound if you react by giving yourself massive amounts of insulin, especially if you're public speaking. Last thing you want to do is give yourself a whack of insulin and then down on the floor while you're doing this.
I have exactly the same thing. Anytime I go on stage, music performance is the big one. Yeah, up I go. And then the worst part is then when the pump wants to alarm and tell you that. So I have to be so careful with alarm settings for these kind of things, because I don't want to be on stage in the middle of a super quiet, sensitive moment and then some alarm is screaming off for the whole auditorium to hear.
I actually
Type
use it
1
as a bit
things.
of a strategy, and the team here at the Family Centre has laughed at me many a time, because when I meet new donors and I'm trying to explain to the teams what type 1 is like, why you should donate and support the Family Centre, and the second I have a conversation, because I'm stressed about the meeting, my pump will go doo doo doo, and it's just a little insight into what life is like with type 1 diabetes. So there you go. Sometimes you can use it to your advantage. All right, let's talk about some other things that can cause unexplained highs. Really classic one is the kinked cannula, or a failed insertion of your site. So if you're using an insulin pump, it's worth changing your insertion site. If you're on MDI, check that needle, replace the needle, have another go, see if it makes any difference. I had one the other day where my Omnipod deployed. I felt the injection, so felt like everything was happy days. And 2 hours later was sitting at 22, pulled the pod off, and yes, it had fired the cannula, it just hadn't broken the skin. So these things can happen. It's pretty rare, but it can happen. So I essentially think through all the parts of the chain. How's insulin getting into my body? Are all of those pieces working, or are they not? And can I play around with them? Really interesting one that's getting more attention these days is how long your site has been sitting on your body. And every one of us has been told off by a diabetes educator at some point who has said you must change it every 3 days. Well, what's actually really interesting, if you are using gluco as your way of looking at your blood glucose reports from your CGM, there's a new report that they've published. So click on your Insights button, and there's one called Infusion Set Replacement. And what it will show you is, based on how long you've had your infusion set in, what's the effect? Am I becoming more resistant at day 3, at day 4? And it's a great way to remind yourself that you have actually created a little wound in your body, and the body is resisting it and trying to heal it. And insulin is becoming slower as it goes through the infusion set. It's becoming less effective. So there is actually a really good reason for that. And it's not just avoiding site infections. It is that your insulin can become much less effective over time. So have a think about that, change the site. One that I do all the time and drives me nuts is picking the wrong profile if I'm using an insulin pump. So I'll travel, I'll change time zones, I'll forget to change it back. I'll put my sick profile on and then I'll forget to turn it off. I will go into exercise mode and forget to turn it off. Those of you who have seen that T-Slim has just released an update that allows you to put a timer on exercise mode, recognizing that we all forget to turn it off. That was a change that took about 5 years longer than it should have, but never mind.
Not that we're better.
Not that we're bitter at all. And last one I wanted to throw out before I hand over to Adam for any other thoughts is, remember that now that we're in the world of CGMs and we're all super excited by it, they can still be wrong. And it is worth sometimes, if you've got an unexplained high, just verifying it is actually an unexplained high. Sometimes sensors read wrong. And there's been a really interesting change in the health professional world now that CGM is out there. And lots of health professionals are telling us just rely on your CGM. They're not going back to that, maybe do a finger stick and see if you've got the two things lining up. Yes, CGM 99.9% of the time is doing really well. But if you've got something unexplained going on, and before you rip your pump off or give yourself another injection or go to, I must be getting sick, just do a verify, a finger stick. I know none of us want to do finger sticks anymore. I've had more than enough of them in my life. But if it's really genuinely unexplained, you can't think of what's going on, you haven't got, an itchy site, you didn't hit a blood vessel when you were going in, all of these kind of things, then just do a stick. See if the two numbers say the same thing. Every so often, you'll be surprised. Sometimes they do get it wrong. Anything I've missed, Adam?
I think that is a very comprehensive list, Benjamin. I can't think of anything to add to that.
Anyone would think that I've had lots of unexplained highs. That would be accurate.
Yes, haven't we all? Yeah. I think that is a good segue, though, into... Okay, maybe I do have something to add. Steroids. So I literally had a phone conversation with someone who rang up the center this morning, and she said, my doctor put me on steroids. They said they avoided the oral steroids because I have type 1, but it was a steroid cream. I'm not intimately familiar with the difference that generally has on type 1, but it seems that this person, well, they either had an unexplained high or it was due to this steroid cream. So shot up to 20 or whatever last night. Steroids are just something that can really smash blood glucose levels, and you become super insulin resistant. You can have your basals at 200% and doubling all your correction factors and still, it's just not budging. I'm not saying that's what you should try first up. Talk to your educator. Be careful. Don't rage bolus too much. But just know that steroids are absolutely one of those known things. I think it comes up in our groups every couple of months. Someone's like, I've just got on steroids. Has anybody noticed that they were really high on these? Yes. So public service announcement, steroids are one of those things. So yeah, talk to your diabetes team, ideally before you start taking them, or just have a look and see what other people's experiences have been so that you can kind of prepare yourself for the fact that this kind of thing might happen.
It's a really important public service announcement, and it's also a reminder that we have a clinical pharmacist here, Mira, on staff now who can give some advice on that. It is something that people do forget. I've been prescribed steroids before without that warning. Luckily, I know now, after having had too many steroids over my time, what it does. And I just want to re-emphasize what Adam said on how much of an impact steroids can have. It's different for everyone, so be careful. And again, not a healthcare professional, but we have spoken to people and we've had many experiences where the resistance can be really extreme. People have doubled their doses, tripled their doses to try and get their blood glucose to come back into line. The amount of time it can take is really different for different people. Some people find after a steroid injection for 2 weeks, their blood glucose is crazy. Other people say, look, it's the day and the day after. It really depends on how your body reacts to it. I unfortunately seem to get tenosynovitis all the time, trigger thumb, trigger finger, all kinds of things. So I've had lots of these. I avoid them like the plague because for at least a week, I will find my blood glucose is really crazy out of control. And just to add to the public service announcement here, watch out for the rebound low, because whilst your resistance will go through the roof, for some people, me included, when it stops being resistant, seems to be like it flicks a switch. So suddenly I was on 400% of the insulin I needed, and then I don't need it anymore, and bang, blood glucose straight through the floor. So it's one just to keep a little bit of a watch on.
Yeah, wrong time of day. That could really kick
it's
you in the
probably
butt.
when I'm doing public speaking, because every time I public speak, I go high and then low. It's great.
Is that because of a rage bolus?
No comment. Moving on, Adam.
All right. I think we just have time for one last quick one before we wrap up today. Thank you everyone for joining us. I was recently in a meeting with the Diabetes in Schools team, and the topic came up about how often do school plans need to be renewed, basically. Some schools, most schools, it all goes fine. It's just like, here's the plan. They go, okay, cool. Other schools are quite adamant about, well, no, we're not making any changes unless it's in the plan. Some schools are like, you need a new plan every so often. Anyway, to give a little bit of clarity to that, because there's been some questions about it in our parents community, you only need a new school diabetes management plan if something significant in your diabetes management has changed, in your child's diabetes management has changed. So if your school's saying, this is last year's one, we need a new one for this year, if your child is still on the same pump, or all of the general management stuff is consistent, then there's no need for a new plan. And PCH and the Diabetes in Schools team will back you up on that. Basically, they don't want to have to do more paperwork than they need to, and I'm sure the school doesn't either. So just kind of letting them know that that's the message from the Diabetes in Schools team hopefully will be enough. If not, flick them on to the relevant person in that team, and I'm sure they'll be able to clear that up for you with some authority.
And
Schools
just
are
as a public
conscious.
service announcement, if, as Adam said, there's lots of schools out there, your experience may vary. If you find that you're running into some real difficulties, please don't hesitate to give the Family Centre a call. We are plugged into the Diabetes in Schools team. We have liaison with the education department. If it's proving to be really difficult, we can get involved and help you navigate what that can look like. Obviously, with thousands of people being trained in thousands of different schools, sometimes the message gets a bit lost somewhere, and we're more than happy to help you find your way through that.
100%. All right. Thanks for joining us for Community Q&A this week. Quick little reminder. So if you are in the southwest of WA, Beck Newton heads down there regularly. In Margaret River and Bustleton, she sees patients. So if you're looking for a diabetes educator and you're in the southwest, someone who has specific type 1 experience, I know that's kind of another level to find. Beck will be down there again on the 19th and 22nd of March. April. So call the Family Centre if you'd like to book in with her. Mira's seeing patients on Saturdays if you'd like to go in for a medication review. Benjamin mentioned that previously. And if you're south of the river, we've got Shana Critchett now, legendary educator from Curtin University. She teaches the diabetes education program there. So if you're south of the river, she's practicing in Coburn on Fridays. So we've got someone a bit closer for you, so you don't have to come all the way to Stirling with us. Lovely to see you all again. We'll see you next week.
See you next week, everyone.